Once, while returning home from work in the evening, I saw my neighbor, a man of about 50, lying drunk on a bench in the park. He lived in my building, in the next entrance. I thought to myself, let me help him get home. Why should he sleep on the street? Someone might rob him. Though, honestly, what could anyone take from him? A bag with alcohol and snacks, a cheap phone, maybe a bit of cash. Judging by the situation, he'd gone to the store but didn't have the strength to make it back home. Alcohol had defeated him. I shook him gently, and he tried to explain something in slurred speech. I didn't understand the words, but from his tone and gestures, it seemed he and another neighbor, along with his wife, were celebrating some kind of anniversary. When we reached his place, I heard the sound of a loud TV. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. By that time, the man, let's call him George, managed to pull the keys out of his pocket. I opened the door, but as soon as we entered, he collapsed to the floor and immediately fell asleep. I went to the room where the TV noise was coming from, planning to let his wife and their drinking companion know that George was home safe and not empty-handed. When I opened the door, I was greeted by quite a scene. The coffee table was covered in empty bottles and leftovers, and nearby on the bed was George's wife, let's call her Martha, cuddling with some other man. Well, I thought, looks like they weren't too bored while George was out getting more drinks. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos to show George later. After that, I woke her up. At first, she didn't understand what was happening, but once she recognized me, she sobered up a bit. I spoke clearly and slowly, telling her to send her lover home immediately, or I'd show the pictures to her husband. I went to the kitchen to wait while she handled the situation. Martha, realizing the seriousness of it all, quickly sent the man on his way. Together, we dragged George to the bedroom and put him on the bed. I decided to give Martha a bit of a lecture, even though I was the same age as their daughter. Martha offered me a drink, hoping to negotiate my silence. I'm not much of a drinker, but I agreed to have one shot to calm her down. Martha was a blonde with dyed hair and had aged fairly well, though the years were starting to show. She worked as a cashier in a grocery store, and in her younger days, plenty of men had admired her. Honestly, that hadn't changed much even now. After the first shot, Martha poured herself another. I started scolding her, telling her she didn't respect her husband. By the third shot, she calmed down and began to justify herself, saying, "You're still young, you don't understand much." With the alcohol in my system, I started seeing her differently. Maybe she was right. I was young and inexperienced, and at the time I had recently broken up with my girlfriend. Then she asked me, "So, are you going to tell George, or can we come to an agreement?" as she stroked my hand. I didn't think for long. Placing my other hand over hers, I said, "Of course we can come to an agreement. Martha, you've always been charming." I winked at her. She gave me a hungry look, smiled, and sat on my lap. What happened next, right there in the kitchen, would have been impossible to stop had her husband walked in. Later, after we'd calmed down, Martha gave me her phone number. "Call me in a few days and we'll arrange another meeting," she said. And so, an evening with a drunk neighbor brought some excitement into my otherwise dull life, thanks to Martha, a remarkable woman who could make anyone's blood run hot.